What is up, fantasy people? You are back. This is the True North Fantasy Pod presented by the Fantasy Points Media Group. I am Trav, and I'm, let's say, snug as a bug in a rug tonight in Dirty Laundry Studios. Super excited for this episode. Co-hosting and West Coasting tonight, you already know, is Tyrell McLaughlin. What's going on, Ty?
Not much. Sports, kind of heaven today. We were talking before about just some of the wackiness outside of the football world before we started recording. But, one of the good things is that we get just a buffet of sports right now. It's awesome. So full go for hockey. Thoughts are with John Tavares. If you saw that, that was just a crazy injury in the Habs-Leafs game, and crazy heated Penguins Islanders game. That was a blast. I mean, the Jays are in a big series with the Dead Sox. We had Indiana basketball, but that's in Washington. I think Washington's gonna handily take care of business there with the real Beal and Westbrook and them. And then we also, Trav, had Corey Connors, the Canadian, jumping out to an early 2-stroke lead after day one at the Players. And we're capping it all off with just one of the true OG GOATs of the industry on the program tonight. So I think living the dream is an undersell tonight.
Yeah, man, this is really cool. I do want to say that I have been a little bit under the weather the last couple days, so this sexy radio voice is not natural, but let's embrace it while we got it, folks. Okay. And one thing, Ty, that our listeners might not know is that this year our rankings through the Fantasy Pros expert platform have been accepted to Fantasy Pros ECR. So we are a part of their expert consensus rankings this year, which is really cool to be a part of. And that's part of why we're really fired up for this week's guest, because he is somebody whose content we've been soaking up for a long time. Just like a lot of that is centered around his accuracy, one of the most accurate rankers in the biz. And the managing editor over at fantasypoints.com. One of my personal favorites to listen to, just not only for the quality of content, but for the energy that he brings. And that would be Mr. Joe Dolan. You can find him on Twitter at FG_Dolan. How you doing tonight, man? It's nice to have you in the house, Joe.
I'm doing well, guys. It's good to be with you. Finally, I've been listening and following along, and I'm glad you guys are part of this network. But I mean, it kind of felt like I was observing and listening from afar here without actually being on the podcast, getting a chance to actually talk to you guys. I'm really excited to be here. Talking some best ball, I'm sure. Just getting ready for the season. I did a draft just earlier today. And the thing I love about best ball, obviously, as you guys well know, is like the market, it adjusts in real time. It's like looking at Coinbase. Like whatever inane thing Elon Musk tweets out, and it either tanks or sends crypto to the moon. And it but whenever whatever inane things come out of Anthony Lynn's mouth, then end up tanking the value of DeAndre Swift, who I got in the third round of a draft just this afternoon.
Ooh.
So
thank you, Anthony Lynn.
Yeah, it's just it's like best ball, man. There's nothing like it. And one of the reasons that like I had success, I think, in the past, and we had success in the past with the Fantasy Pros rankings is, just being able to monitor that market and then really just taking it all the way up until the end and just getting a good feel for what those players were. The one thing about those rankings, I'm sure that you guys were talking about, is I never input them until like the last 3 days before the season starts, and I frankly just wonder how many people just forget to update them. Like I mean, quite frankly, it gives you an advantage just in and of itself by doing that. But yeah, there's a little trade secret for you guys. Make sure you do that. But no, it's good to talk to you guys, and I'm excited for tonight.
No, the pleasure is 100% ours, because Trav mentioned it. Really, you are one of the most accurate analysts, and I've talked a lot about following the right people and stuff throughout our podcast tenure. And I've always thrown out the names like John Paulson. You got Justin Boone, Jake Seeley, the footballers, Pat Fitzmaurice. But Joe Dolan is always one of the names I've always thrown out. And I remember when Silva left the Fantasy Feast, the other podcast that you host, we know Ross Tucker can slang anything. That's an understatement. So he really kind of built up the new host reveal, I would say. And, replacing Silva was already such a big ask. And then we heard that it was Joe Dolan announced, and our reaction was just like, awesome. The most accurate ranker in the business. So like, has it been kind of a trip taking over for him? And you mentioned about, Warren Buffett or what's his face, the
Elon Musk,
crazy SNL guy, tweeting something out. I think, Silva is the guy who always can change the market with a tweet. And it's not unlike the impact that you almost have these days as well.
I'm not going to go that far. Definitely not. Especially since, sometimes I just tweet about like listening to music and stuff. And I was tweeting about golf today and all that stuff.
Really quick, Joe, the reason I fell in love with you originally, well, actually, but you've always brought music into the conversation on your fantasy podcast. And not even long ago, you mentioned going to I think it was Smashing Pumpkins show or something, and that Metric opened for them. And Metric's a band that's here in Victoria all the time. So that was just too cool to hear you talk about it. And we have very similar taste in music for sure.
So here's a funny part. This is going to be, this is a tangent here. And I know we're a little time strapped tonight, so I don't want to go on too many tangents, but that's kind of what I do. So I think I didn't meet John Hansen until 2009 when I started with Fantasy Guru. But Hansen and I figured out that we might have been at the same concert at the Trocadero in Philadelphia, which I think is either since renamed or closed, in 2001 to see a Canadian band.
Nice.
Which was Our Lady Peace.
Not so nice.
I'm kidding. So like I think I was like 15 years old, and
that's great. That's Much Music days. Like, they were hot, I bet.
Oh, Much Music, yeah. And do they still give out the Junos?
Oh yeah,
they do.
Time. I think we have some Tragically Hip ordeal going on for the Junos.
Gord Downey. So that was Our Lady Peace, Tragically Hip, Sloan, and
right on.
Oh god,
dude,
what was
good?
What was the one band? The lead singer was mononymous. He had one name. One more astronaut. God, it was like Our Lady Peace. The name was like Our Lady. I'm Mother Earth.
Leave you hanging big time.
I'm Mother Earth. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I forget the guy's name, but he went by one name. Like Sting or something, but it wasn't Sting. It was just like a name. He was like Bob, the lead singer of I Mother Earth. But anyway, there you go. My Canadian alt rock from the 90s and early 2000s. Yeah.
Well, it doesn't surprise me. Like you and John Hansen, like back at Fantasy Guru, just the chemistry you guys had. I think Fantasy Guru back in the day was kind of like an old cheat code, in my opinion. It's where I first heard guys like Graham Barfield too, and Tom Brawley, you, Joe, and you and Tom Brawley is a dynamic duo if there ever was one. And you mentioned legendary John Hansen, and you bring up legendary and Fantasy Guru. That's the first time I heard Cosell as well in that kind of setting. And I think that kind of stuff really paved the way for us to be able to talk about nerd stuff like formations and schemes and marry kind of a lot of the real football aspect that we all love with the team building and the things we love about fantasy, because that stuff does impact the players, their playing time, the volume. But yeah, I wanted to get some of that accuracy information before we jump into things, just to give people a fair warning to get the notepads out, because tonight we want to get the skinny on some of these more polarizing players, probably some rookies for early impact sake, and maybe hit some of the more ambiguous situations we want to get right for fantasy. So some buzzy players, some ADP movers and shakers maybe. But yeah, I also just wanted to reflect a little bit on Fantasy Guru, because I think it's had quite the lasting impact, that entire team. And I should have mentioned, Trav, that like all the golden gooses from that team at Fantasy Guru are now basically running the show at fantasypoints.com.
Yeah. So, sorry, guy, Trav, you go ahead.
Have at it.
If you're going to heap praise on me, I want to hear it. No,
I was just going to say it's a beautiful combination of sharp minds, which actually was going to lead me into an ad read, but go ahead, Joe.
Well, anyway, just like, we took an opportunity to do something a little bit new. And spread our wings a little bit. I just didn't feel, and nothing but respect for Jeff Manns and what over at Fantasy Guru, but like it was just something we felt we needed to do. And the thing is though, you mentioned Fantasy Guru being kind of a cheat code in the early days, and I thought that was an interesting point because that I think when Fantasy Guru started, John Hansen started it as a newsletter and then the website in '95. It was a cheat code because there wasn't much fantasy football content, and now we're melded with like an entertainment industry. We're trying to entertain because there's a lot of that content out there, and you're just trying to create a narrow edge. I don't think any of us are going to sit here and tell you all we've got the magic answers. Like back in the day, John Hansen was a guy, and he'll tell you this fully. He was a guy who was 100% hungry. He had a satellite dish and multiple TVs, and that right away gave him a huge advantage over everybody. Like nobody can get that kind of advantage anymore. I mean, the only way you can literally get an advantage like that is if you're legitimately calling plays in the NFL. And if you're calling plays to win fantasy games, you're not going to be calling plays for very long in the NFL. So, like the industry, even since I've been in it since 2009, and in 2009, there was a lot of websites, and almost all of them were under-designed. They looked like they were still in the 90s, GeoCities, Angel Fire type websites. And that's not a knock, but it was still a niche content space. You weren't getting the fantasy magazines dominating the magazine stands even in 2009. And it's just kind of amazing where we're at right now. With podcasts, it's really fascinating, and good on you guys coming in and creating a space, because I frankly just think about how lucky I was to get in with John when I did, and people were like, how did you get into the fantasy thing? And I said, well, I was good at fantasy. I wrote a fantasy football column for the Philadelphia Eagles website, but ultimately I got lucky. And maybe I interviewed well, it's like, and when I see somebody like you guys or like Graham Barfield or Scott Barrett, like grind their way to where they're at right now, I'm almost like, in a way, I feel guilty.
Yeah, but you shouldn't, because of this, what you're saying is just a testament to the accuracy that you've put on the paper. You know what I mean? Because you had a half-decade stretch where you were literally the most accurate ranker in the entire industry for half a decade straight. Like, that's a half-decade period where you were the most accurate. And it is the same people, the same cast of characters who are finishing at the final table, so to speak, of rankings accuracy year in and year out. So clearly you are grinding those edges pretty well.
I appreciate that, guys. Yeah. Let me let you guys grind your edges so you can pay the bills. So let me shut up for a minute.
Depends. I'm not sure if that's safe for the airwaves there, Joe, grinding the edge.
Dude, it's like 10:15 here. All right.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. We're only 13 minutes in. It's not time to get PG here. But one thing I did want to say, talking about all the accuracy and the rankings and the team over at Fantasy Points, is just, if anybody wants to go and soak up all of that content, we can help you do that and get a little bit off the top for doing so. So Joe, you've got your rankings up there. You guys put projections out recently. You guys have a draft guide. Scott Barrett's got a ton of analytics out there. Graham Barfield just put out some yards created, a little analysis today or yesterday, I believe. And so there's just tons of stuff coming out of the website. That wins above replacement article that just came out and the guy's name is slipping my mind. I apologize, but it's just tons of really good stuff. And so if you want to go over there and check it out, you can use the promo code 21TrueNorth10, which is all capitals, to get 10% off of the subscription over there. And even without the promo code, it is the best deal in the industry. The bang for your buck is just insane over there. So get another 10% off of that with 21TrueNorth10, and let them know that we sent you. So we appreciate anybody who's gone and signed up, and hope you're enjoying all the work that the team over at Fantasy Points is putting in. Okay, Ty, so let's get into some of these players here, buddy. I'm super excited for this episode because we did a little bit of digging into some of Joe's rankings, and there was definitely some really, really good stuff in there, some notable stuff. And so we wanted to kind of talk about a little bit of it, and we'll probably learn some stuff tonight, and hopefully our listeners do too. First, Joe, I want to get into the quarterback position because it is one that we've been talking to a lot of our guests about this offseason, just with the rise in quarterback scoring. We know that 2020 was the highest scoring quarterback season of all time. I was actually using some of Ty's hit rates data, and I found that 25% of every 350 plus point quarterback season has been scored just in 2020. So of all time, any quarterback who has scored over 350 points, A quarter of them were just this past season. And obviously that's largely due to the rushing upside that some of these young guys present, Joe. And I think we're also seeing that in drafts as well. But I'm curious if you're biting on that and drafting quarterbacks earlier than you normally would, or are you still waiting and trying to play like the backs of some tiers to attack it that way and get some better value on your position players?
Well, this is a multiple part conversation here, and the reason why the late round quarterback thing, or I think more so since best ball's kind of become such a dominant force, at least from May through August, is mid round quarterback, and let's just look back at the last few years. Patrick Mahomes was a double digit round pick in 2018. Of course, and there were reasons for that. He was an unknown, he had one game, but he had a lot of talent, but we just didn't know. Lamar Jackson in 2019 was a double-digit round pick. You could get him 9th, 10th, 11th round. Josh Allen last year, 9th, 10th, 11th round. And it was so easy from my perspective to identify these guys. And it was so easy to say, this is the guy I'm going to be targeting. I didn't get enough of Lamar in 2019, by the way, and I'll fully admit that. But it look, Josh Allen last year was such an easy target. He was such an easy target, and he ended up one of my most drafted quarterbacks, and it was easy to do that. Now, here's the thing. I like to pride myself on, the accuracy and all that stuff. I don't got a secret formula here. I'm not looking like Charlie from It's Always Sunny with the board and like all the connections. I like to rank based on common sense, okay? And it's served me pretty well to this point. And
I'd say
the problem here is when you rank based on common sense, very often when something becomes a cheat code, like drafting quarterbacks in the middle rounds, people are going to pick up on that. So what would have been the analog to Lamar Jackson, okay? Jalen Hurts. Lamar Jackson came in at the end of the 2018 season when he was a rookie. Didn't perform great, but he had the rushing upside. He didn't throw the ball great. He was awful in the playoffs, but they benched him for Flacco. You knew Flacco was going to be gone. Turns out, similar-ish situation with Carson Wentz in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And Jalen Hurts was okay at the end of last season. Had a good game, had an okay game, had a couple of bad games, but he ran and he put up massive numbers. Well, here's the problem. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. So you're not getting Jalen Hurts in the 11th round.
Exactly.
It's not happening. So all these guys who let's look at the guys who are going to run, who are guaranteed to start. So the guys who are going to run and are guaranteed to start. Mahomes is going to run a little bit. He's not going to hurt you with his legs. So he's obviously up there. Lamar Jackson. You're looking at Josh Allen. Kyler Murray.
Deshaun Watson if he plays.
Deshaun if he plays, that's an entirely different story.
That's a sketchy guy to take as your quarterback.
Not a best ball story.
Dak Prescott, okay? Presuming he's going to run, which I think is up in the air.
But I agree that at least Mahomes, Dak, these guys are going to hit the thresholds that we're setting in recent years. Yeah.
Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, Russell Wilson. None of these guys are making it out of the top 10 at the quarterback position.
Yeah.
Maybe if Aaron Rodgers says, I'm back, baby. I'm playing in Green Bay and we're going to try to get this thing. Maybe I have Hurts above Rodgers right now, just only because there is that little bit of a chance that Rodgers decides I'm going to go host Jeopardy. Screw you guys. Deshaun Watson obviously is a completely different story, but none of these guys are available in those middle rounds. The guys who are available in the middle rounds are Stafford, Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins, these, boring guys who I think are going to have good seasons, but they're not the cheat code quarterbacks. They're not those guys. So what are you left with here if you're looking for value at the quarterback position? Joe Burrow coming off an explosive knee injury. Now, apparently he's going to be ready, but is he going to have the mobility?
That's wild. That is wild.
It is, but
that's like the worst injury you can have. It's crazy.
I think we're getting that discount, in my opinion, in ADP. I don't know if it's going to shoot up a round or two come redraft season, but it feels like we are getting a slight discount on Burrow because that's baked into it.
And agreed, because I think he'd be going ahead of your Staffords if he hadn't gotten hurt. And I like Stafford this year, but that's neither here nor there. So you're looking at Burrow, okay? But how much is he going to have that second reaction ability? The offensive line still isn't good, even though the team is loaded itself. So you got that question. Matt Ryan, the team's loaded around him. But Julio, there's a question there, and we know Matt Ryan's not giving you anything with his legs. So you're looking at Trevor Lawrence. All right.
Who I like, yeah.
Yeah, I like Trevor Lawrence too. His ADP is a high-end QB2 or a low-end QB1. So you're paying up for a guy who's never taken an NFL snap. Doesn't mean it can't work. Look at Justin Herbert last year.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean it can't work, but you're not exactly getting a discount. So you're looking at these guys, and then this ties it all into the question of who are the guys who might be able to be those cheat code quarterbacks who are either coming off of a rough season, as was the case for Josh Allen last year.
There's not many.
And it
Tua and Daniel Jones, maybe. But that's
Daniel Jones, maybe. Now, Daniel Jones probably fits the profile better than anybody, only because he will run and they're loaded around him, but nobody believes in him. Yeah. That was kind of the case. But the difference between Daniel Jones and Josh Allen is evident. Josh Allen has just way more talent than Daniel.
And Jason Garrett and Brian Dable, I think, is a massive difference as well. Yeah,
completely agree. And this is going to get into probably one of the topics of the show and one of the topics of the offseason. What do you do with Justin Fields and Trey Lance? Yeah. Because those are the guys who fit the profile.
Totally.
Now Justin Fields, like if you were to take Kyle Shanahan, put him in a hot air balloon and drop him in my office right here, and he were to tell me Trey Lance is playing 15 games, I'm ranking Trey Lance in my top 15 at quarterback.
Love it.
Like that's just the way it's going to be, but you have to build in that uncertainty. There was nobody challenging Josh Allen last year. Fields and Lance, they're going to play eventually. I think Fields sooner than Lance. I just think that's a better bet. Maybe both start week one. If both start week one, they're both getting drafted in the top 16 at quarterback. But so that's why I am drafting quarterbacks. And I just took a very long way to say I am drafting quarterbacks earlier. I was out on Lamar Jackson last year. I hated him as a second or third round pick. He's a 5th and 6th round pick this year. That's a huge difference. You can start your team. Let's just say Dalvin Cook. You can start with Dalvin Cook, DK Metcalf, Justin Jefferson, and Robert Woods, and then draft Lamar Jackson in a best ball. Okay, now there is something.
That's filthy.
There's something where I'm willing to be in on Lamar Jackson. And look, the market has adjusted. They have put the right quarterbacks up at the top of the board. Yeah. Even somebody like Hurts, who you don't even know how good he is, but you know how he produced for fantasy. That's why for the first time in a long time, I'm not going to be drafting Mahomes. I don't think all that much. But I will be in on Lamar and Kyler and Hurts because I do think there is value with those guys. I don't know if it's not cheating. It's not one of those ones where you come out of your draft and, I send a screenshot of my team to Barfield and I'm like, dude, I just got Josh Allen in the 11th round. Look at this. Yeah. Like, it's not happening this year.
But if you get Herbert, I would point out, I was listening to the Fantasy Hustle a couple days ago and it happened to be featuring a best ball tournament that you were involved in.
Correct.
And I saw that you took Justin Herbert, and what you did is almost attack the back of that tier that was running at that time. So I think quarterback runs are going to be extremely important this year. And what I noticed is that you also arguably started a run at quarterback later on with Justin Fields. So I definitely like the targets that you were after there, the profile of quarterbacks you're targeting. And I also think you did cool things where you arguably attacked the back of a tier in that very important area of the draft that you want to get that difference maker at quarterback. And then you took your shot on a quarterback. And I think like when you took Fields there, I bet a lot of people were cursing you out because there was just a quarterback run waiting to start when I was listening to that.
Yeah, that was a tough draft. There was a lot of things that I liked about that draft. And by the way, make sure you check that out. That was Brian Drake, Drake Fantasy on Twitter. Yeah. And it was the Fantasy Football Hustle. And I picked from the 5-hole, and there was a lot of things I liked about that draft, and there's a lot of things I didn't like. And one thing I do realize is if you come out of your draft this year really happy with your running backs, I think you're going to be significantly shorthanded somewhere else. It's just, sure. And I've Scott Barris put out some research on the website just talking about how he wants to start his best ball drafts with bell cow, but then you want to go wide receiver heavy. And I've been trying to take that to heart because God, guys, it is so tough to pass up the fact that you can draft Christian McCaffrey and then go like AJ Brown, DK Metcalf at the 2-3 turn, and understanding you're passing on maybe a DeAndre Swift or an Edwards-Helaire, who I like again this year. He's cheaper this year. A David Montgomery. You're passing on those guys.
Names. Right after the names you kind of mentioned there, you really are starting to fall off a cliff there, and hit rates historically really bear that out.
But it's just like I feel like I'm going to figure it out later. And there's some running backs who I don't even think are very good, who are going in the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th round, and where I'm like, okay, it doesn't matter if I don't think they're very good. Like one of the names that I've brought up, and again, another tangent here, to Barfield, and I texted him tonight, is like, dude, I'm not even sure if the Bills are going to run the ball more than 5 times a game this year, but Devin Singletary's going like 150 plus picks into a draft. I wanted nothing to do with Singletary last year, but this year, I mean, they didn't do anything at running. They brought in Matt Breida. Okay. Miami had like one of the worst backfield situations in the NFL last year, and Breida couldn't get on the field. So I'm not fretting that. So, like there are still names like that where that's kind of how I've been building my teams. And that plays into the fact that I'm drafting quarterbacks earlier this year. So there are fewer opportunities for me to pound those top 6 round running backs in a way that I would in the past.
Yeah, that's it is like there's like just a really ugly zone to that running back position. And then, like you said, if you can get 2 strong running backs in those first 5 rounds or something like that, that's great. But you definitely are going to be sacrificing that depth, and you're going to have to. I like to go running back heavy and stock up on them, but I've definitely been seeing that I feel a little bit more sketched out about the back running backs in my depth chart as opposed to, say, the wide receivers, which I might normally be a little bit weaker at, which I just feel like I need to be strong at this year.
I mean, yeah, it's like the wide receiver. It's just there's just so many guys in the first 8 rounds. Like I've done 3 best balls already. This week where I've gotten Chase Claypool as my wide receiver 4. And so when I'm in that mode, I'm like, okay, now I can wait a little bit and I can try to bank on like not necessarily a bounce back, but a breakout for like a Jalen Reagor as a wide receiver 5.
Right.
I can see if maybe Elijah Moore can be my wide receiver 5, or I can take a boring ass old veteran like T.Y. Hilton and just say, hey, I mean, he's there, he's going to get targets. So I've just found myself exactly like you take him as a wide receiver 5, and if he's like in your lineup 3 times, that's great. That's kind of the way I've been viewing that. And that's been kind of my build this year, even though I'm never going to leave drafts comfortable with my running back position.
No, and I think that's the way to do it because it is the most volatile position by far, right? Like, I mean, tight end's up there, but the most important volatile position in fantasy. And I actually want to get into some of those running backs just because the projections we mentioned are live on fantasypoints.com. A big takeaway for me was Christian McCaffrey's kind of massive separation in those sets of projections. So, Joe, do you agree with Christian McCaffrey being like the unequivocal 101 in all formats of fantasy drafts? Or do you think Dalvin or Alvin or anybody else could give him a run for his money?
So when we were doing our first run of best ball rankings, I had a hot take and I put Dalvin Cook as my number 1 running back. I've since switched that to Christian McCaffrey. I think it's a little bit closer for best ball than it is than maybe you might think, only because I just think Minnesota is better than Carolina, and I'm not necessarily a Sam Darnold believer. But I mean, that doesn't mean I don't think McCaffrey's just going to get a ton of work. I mean, look, their number 2 running back right now looks like Chuba Hubbard. So, I mean, he's a rookie. Chuba Hubbard's not coming in there to take 35% of the snaps from Christian McCaffrey. It's not going to happen.
Sir.
So, I mean, there's more competition in Minnesota. Madison can certainly get it done. They brought back Amir Abdullah Nwangwu out of Iowa State, 4th round. And he's basically a Mike Boone clone, just a freak athlete who I think is going to play on special teams. But now McCaffrey's the number 1. I don't know if I would have it 90 points difference that our projections have, but hey, those are the projections, that's what it spit out. So that's what we're going to present to you. So we do put a human touch on those, but when something like that comes out, you have to look at it and say, all right, what are we doing here? And I think McCaffrey, and the thing about McCaffrey was even when he played last year, he dominated for fantasy. Like, unfortunately, it wasn't too much, but I mean, he did put the numbers
per
up.
game. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think, sorry, Ty, I just want to put a little feather in the cap there on that Dalvin is a little bit closer, and thinking that Carolina could potentially be a little bit more pass heavy this coming year if Matt Rule and Joe Brady think that they've got their guy at quarterback with Sam Darnold, regardless of what we might think about him. They could potentially try to pass the ball a little bit more with Christian McCaffrey back in, which might bring some more targets towards those wide receivers. And I think Dalvin, that offense is just so condensed, and I don't think the competition behind him, while pretty solid, is really going to take that crown whatsoever from Dalvin, just especially with these guys having those receivers and maybe thinking this is their final year to squeeze that juice out of Kirk Cousins before they got to pay him again. But I think there is definitely some merit to the fact that Dalvin's a lot closer to CMC than people might believe.
It's hard to ask for what we've gotten from Christian McCaffrey going forward, for sure. And I think there is like a story to tell that with the tight ends that they brought in, Dan Arnold and Tommy Tremble in the third round, we just have devalued the tight end position so much last year under Joe Brady's system. If we don't have to, like, if there is some tight end market share to account for in 2021, we often see that'll come from the running back position. So there's ways that I think Christian McCaffrey could come back to earth a little bit. And I think the easiest way would be just Dalvin Cook scoring a lot more touchdowns than Christian McCaffrey in 2021.
I mean, McCaffrey can come back to earth and still be the number one overall fantasy.
Exactly. True that.
So that's the thing that like people are looking at, like, oh, he didn't go 1,000 again, and he's still the number one overall fantasy player. That, that's in the realm of outcomes as well. But I mean, I do think there is something to be said that, of like the top 5 ADP running backs, like how many of these teams are you confident are going to be good? And, I would say I'm pretty confident Minnesota is going to be good. I'm pretty confident.
New Orleans, maybe.
Right. But are you would you bet on New Orleans being better than a 7-win team?
And I think if they are any worse, it would be because of their defense taking a big step back, the secondary losing so much. So I think it might actually be advantageous for some of the pieces on offense and just how condensed that offense is. I think Alvin Kamara is the forgotten man in that 3-man. Like, I think of it more of a 3-man tier at the very top. And I'd actually put Saquon and Zeke and Aaron Jones in like my next tier.
Yeah, I actually have Henry and Jonathan Taylor.
Or that's right. Yeah, I forgot the guys that I'm just not drafting a lot of.
But Kamara, the thing about Kamara was I do have him 3. Just drafted him today at number 4 overall. Literally just hours before I came on the podcast.
Awesome.
But it was hard to not notice that his targets went in the crapper when Taysom Hill was the quarterback.
Oh, that's the worry. Yeah.
And Taysom's in a competition right now. I mean, if you draft Kamara, now Michael Thomas managed to he was Taysom's guy. So he actually put up better numbers with Taysom than he did with Breeze. Mm-hmm. But if Kamara's your guy, small sample size, caveat and all that, I think you're rooting for Jameis to be the quarterback. If you have Kamara in a dynasty league or something like that.
100%.
So I want to go to a guy whose usage, we don't know what's on the horizon really. Travis Etienne. Etienne, he's making headlines because of the wide receiver usage in Jacksonville's rookie camps. For fantasy, I think he's really tricky because he got that first round draft capital. And over the past decade, about 1/3 of all top 12 running back seasons in fantasy have come from running backs selected in the first round of the NFL draft. He also inserts into this up-and-coming offense tethered to his elite quarterback from college and a head coach who drafted him, like really prioritized him, because it clearly is Urban Meyer making the decisions here in Jacksonville, and I think that is also the problem here. We heard the rumors about Curtis Samuel during free agency. We all fell in love with Percy Harvin and Urban Meyer slapping butts back in the day. And then after the draft, Urban Meyer just said all the wrong things about Travis Etienne, right? Including how interested they were in Kadarius Toney. So, Joe, my loaded question that I'm finally arriving at is, are we encouraged by some of the upside Travis Etienne presents in this offense, or should we be a bit worried about Urban Meyer going a bit too mad scientist with this whole thing in Jacksonville?
Both, which is why I have him at RB24. He's 50 overall in my latest run of my best ball rankings I did today. Like, targets are important, right? Like, Scott Barrett has has studied that targets are 2.7 times as a target, not a reception. A target is 2.7 times as important as a carry in fantasy football. But the question is, how much is Etienne going to be on the field? And, Meyer comes out and says, oh, he's our third down back. Okay. All right. I don't know if I necessarily buy that. You drafted him in the first round, but Urban Meyer is an unknown. And he's out here signing Tebow, and he's saying, he's basically spitting in Travis Etienne's face by saying, really wanted Tony. I mean, it's like,
brutal.
It's like, hey, honey, like, I know you're at your favorite restaurant, like, but it was booked up. I'm sorry. We're going to go to my favorite restaurant instead. Like, like Travis Etienne's like, what? Like, come on, man. Like, I mean, they still drafted him in the first round. He's going to get a nice, pretty penny out of that. But I'm just like, sometimes I think you have to be brave enough to say, I don't know what I don't know. And understand that Etienne at 50 overall, where I have him ranked, is going to look either brilliant or stupid by the end of the year. I'm fully aware of that, but it comes back to that conversation that we just had.
Yeah, the running back.
How many of the guys behind him are you confident saying that guy's finishing better than Travis Etienne this year?
So hard.
Right. I've got JaVonte Williams right behind him. Now, I think JaVonte Williams is obviously going to be a more traditional running back, but they still have Melvin Gordon there. Is Melvin Gordon, even when Williams takes over, going to be the third down back there? Then you've got Chase Edmonds. Okay, well, they signed James Conner. Is Edmonds still going to be that kind of like third down kind of running back? And then behind them, I have Kareem Hunt. Well, he's a number 2 on his own team. You have Melvin Gordon. Like Damian Harris, who I actually just bumped up today based on some hype that's out there. James Robinson's RB30. I mean, like, how many? Kenyon Drake, I have an RB31. Which of those guys are you going to confidently tell me should be ranked ahead of Travis Etienne right now? And at some point, I'm going to bet on talent and I'm going to bet on draft capital. And there is a chance that if he plays the Percy Harvin, Curtis Samuel role that Urban Meyer had popularized at Florida and Ohio State, Darrell Bevel, the offense coordinator, had Harvin in both Minnesota and Seattle. There could be value there if he's catching passes. There can be value there. But I think sometimes you got to be brave enough to admit you don't know what you don't know. There ain't nobody here who can tell me they know what Urban Meyer is going to do with Travis Etienne.
No.
Urban Meyer is a college football power conference head coach. It's easier to dig up dirt on the White House than it is to get a story on one of those programs. So like he's still coming from that mindset where this is my program and I'm going to be in charge of it. And
I can stack talent at positions and I can recruit in free agency. Like, no, you can't do any of that, dude.
And like, not to be like, oh, look at this nut from college, like everybody said when Chip Kelly came out, turned out a lot of them were right.
Yeah.
Mostly
because they continue to, they don't make any concessions. It seems like that would be my point. Yeah.
And that's the thing. You're managing men now, like you're, but I mean, I just don't know what they're going to do with Etienne. And I look at that ranking at RB24 where I have him and I'm like, oh God, that hurts to do that. And then I'm like, but then I look at the guys behind him and I'm like, am I really going to put James Conner in front of Travis Etienne?
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
I'm not doing that. No way. And this comes back to my whole process. I'm going to try to use common sense here, right? Like I'm not putting James Conner. If at the end of the year James Conner has more fantasy points than Travis Etienne, so effing be it. Like, great, like I wasn't ranking James Conner ahead of Travis Etienne. I wasn't going to do it.
Yeah,
like that,
for sure.
And that's the way I approach this.
And from a best ball perspective, there's no way that Travis Etienne isn't plugging into your lineup more often, in my opinion, than James Conner, who's probably plugging in when he scores multiple touchdowns. For the Cardinals.
Lot easier pick to swallow in best ball.
Yeah,
a lot easier pick to swallow in best ball is Etienne. No doubt about that.
And I think like that same common sense can kind of tell us that as a first round running back, there is a high likelihood that Travis Etienne eventually starts taking 10 to 15 carries a game or something like that. And he isn't just a gadget player. And another thing that we actually don't know is how that gadget stuff intertwines with what they might want to do with Laviska Shenault as well. So my hope is that they use Laviska as that gadget guy and use Etienne as maybe more of a traditional running back. But who the hell knows with Urban? I just think like I want that carry volume, just a little bit of floor on the carry volume, just to insulate what we don't know about the pass catching volume. You know.
So my point here when it comes to Laviska Shenault is like. Urban Meyer flat out told you he wanted Kadarius Toney. Well, does he think Laviska Shenault can play that role if he flat out told you he wanted Kadarius Toney and he's playing Travis Etienne in that role? That's another
probably
question.
Not. Yeah.
Trying to sign Curtis Samuel. Yeah, it seems like he wants something more electric because I keep saying this that, Chenault's closer to like an Antonio Gibson than he is Travis Etienne, if you will. You know what I mean? Like he's just a big boy. So I want to go to the more traditional running back, Najee Harris, just because, Joe, I cited that best ball draft to the stars that you were on, and you snap called Najee Harris. Where do you think his ADP settles, and where did you get him in that draft, if you remember?
Late first, early second round is where his ADP settles. Now,
I think so too.
I definitely took him. Did I take him?
I think it was third round. I think it might have been the third round.
I would have jumped for joy. No, I got him at the back end of the second round, which is just stupid. It's stupid. Mm-hmm. It's not going to last very long, and I said out there on Twitter, like where people were like, "Oh, I'm willing to pay a third round pick for Najee Harris." Dude, I'm willing to give you 10 grand for a Beamer too. I mean, like it's not going to happen. Like just like that's not analysis, right? Like, Najee Harris, I'd really like him as a third rounder. Well, no shit. Like
I'd like him as a 10th too. Fuck.
Totally. But I don't get why people are treating him that way, because one thing we do know is that we don't know how much efficiency he's going to be able to amass in Pittsburgh. That's going to be the one concern. I think it's being overblown, but I think the one thing we know is that he's going to be peppered with targets. And I think not peppered, but I think he's going to catch 40 to 50 balls in his sleep. And that's not something you can say about rookie running backs very often.
No, and I think the concern about the offensive line is valid. I have Steeler fans in my life. I'm from Pennsylvania who actually wanted them to take the Mr. Sensible approach. Draft the lineman in the first, draft Trey Sermon in the second or the third round. That's what they wanted them to do. But, I mean, everybody's like, the number one thing I've been getting when with my Najee Harris love, and I do believe if I am picking at the turn, I actually just started a best ball 10 from the turn with Cam Akers and Najee Harris. Now, I don't believe I'm going to be drafting a running back for like 4 or 5 rounds now, but like to me, that's a really great start. But people are like, oh, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire, bro. Like, I mean, I fully admitted when I ranked Clyde Edwards-Helaire aggressively last year that there were landmines that I was trying to jump over. I just liked the situation and I liked the player in that situation that much. It wasn't a disaster, but it we might have gotten maimed a little bit. Like
we just put him in too many My Guy articles and things like that.
Right.
That was our big mistake. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, it's not like he got like 3 carries a game, but you don't anticipate the Le'Veon Bell signing and all that stuff. But
Marlon Mack injury and playing the Texans in week 16 for the Colts and
right. Exactly. But you don't factor those things in. But like when you look at the Steelers, I just don't think, guys, the Steelers are signing Adrian Peterson in August to take carries from Najee Harris. I just don't think that's going to happen with this team. I don't think that Kevin Colbert, who's been at this for a long time, is going to draft a running back in the first round and say, all right, Najee, like, you know what? I know you blew up in rookie minicamp and we're throwing you targets, but Anthony McFarland's our one, man. Like, you got to earn this. Like, I just don't think that's the way the Steelers are operating. I just see fewer landmines. Does that mean this is a pristine situation? No, it doesn't. I don't think, if we're talking pristine situations, I think Dalvin Cook's probably the guy who has that.
Yeah.
Like in terms of the offensive line, well,
Jonathan Taylor,
he's the number 2 overall pick. Taylor even has Nyheim Hines, if you want to be nitpicky.
That's a good point, yeah.
So, but I don't know how many of these guys have pristine situations. Christian McCaffrey might be on a bad football team. So, I know it's not pristine, but I just view this as a guy who, man, and remember, we're 17 games this year. If there is a lock for 300 touches for a rookie running back, I mean, this has got to be it. I mean,
Easy.
Edwards-Helaire, we weren't even counting on that. We were counting on him catching more passes than he did. And Najee, I just think he's going to be used like an old school running back. And volume is king. And I'm going to gobble up that volume. Does that mean there's not going to be games where he has 21 carries for 67 yards? No, it doesn't mean that. But I think
the hire of Matt Canada might compensate for that a little bit, though.
Yeah,
I think the emphasis they've placed in Pittsburgh is just overwhelming on trying to improve that run game.
Did you just bring me on this podcast from Canada so you could talk up Matt Canada?
No, just more the Steelers. I'm actually a Steelers fan. And I also think, we drafted a couple offensive linemen in the draft that aren't sexy names by any means, but they are kind of nose to the dirt guys. And we have 5 to 6 starters on that offensive line. I think as long as we can not screw it up too much and build some continuity through training camp, I actually don't have that much problem. I'll put it this way. The pass protection is what people should be worried about with that offensive line, but good thing Ben gets rid of it in 2 seconds anyways, every single play. And it's the run blocking that was literally just shit last year. It can't be much worse in 2021 than it was in 2020. In fact, the Steelers' run game as a whole has been arguably the worst 3 straight seasons. It's really sad.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, it was a big in my Pittsburgh fan group chat, which I'm just roped into. The big talking point that they gave Pouncey's number to Kendrick Green, the 3rd round.
Yeah, totally.
Big talking point. Big talking point. By the way, if you read the draft guide that you guys are talking about, Greg Cosell, Kendrick Green was a favorite of his.
Yeah,
nice.
So that might be somebody who gets a chance to play sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. I bet
you help in that run game too.
I bet you Najee's average depth of target is probably better than any of the Steelers players last year too. Anyway, so I think that's that's.
So I heard you mention JaVonte Williams, and you kind of said you had him in a tier just behind Travis Etienne, but you do in fact have him ahead of Melvin Gordon. Is that correct?
Yeah, I actually have him just one spot behind Etienne at running back. So and I do have him ahead of Gordon. And here's another kind of. I don't know if this is going to sound poignant or if it's going to sound stupid, but let's keep in mind that the fantasy football season, when it comes to a guy like, and this is for all young guys, all rookies, Trey Lance, Justin Fields included in that as well. The fantasy football season's 1 week longer this year, guys. And it's 1 more week for a young guy who might be behind Melvin Gordon in week 6 to make an impact on your fantasy team and your best ball team. So just keep that in mind. And I think it's maybe a reason. I'm not saying, oh my God, because there's 1 more week, JaVonte Williams should be a 3rd round pick. I'm just saying it's 1 more little, you use the phrase feather in the cap. It's 1 more feather to put in the, I'm going to draft this rookie over this boring veteran because he's got 1 more week to usurp that role. He's got 1 more week to get into the driver's seat the way Jonathan Taylor and Cam Akers did at the end of last season. Both of those guys were league winners in a 16-game season. 1 more week for a JaVonte Williams or an Etienne or a Najee Harris who doesn't have any competition, but just 1 more week for those guys, especially if you're thinking Fields or Lance as a 3rd quarterback in best ball. 1 more week for those guys to make an impact for your team. And, that week could come into play. You could be on the outside looking in on the playoffs in week 14, and Justin Fields is putting up 150 rushing yards out there, and he gets you in there. So just 1 more thing that's influencing my rankings this year, and that's why I'm willing to rank a JaVonte Williams over Melvin Gordon, with also the knowledge that Melvin Gordon's nothing to the Broncos after this year. His contract's up. JaVonte Williams, they traded up for him. He's their back of the future.
All right, so I want to just rip off a couple of wide receiver groups here. I know we're getting close to finishing up here, Joe, but I want to dive into this triumvirate, if you will, of Bengals wide receivers, and that would be Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, and T. Higgins. You have them actually ranked in that particular order there, fairly close together as well, Joe. And I want to start with Jamar Chase because he comes in with the immediate rapport with Joe Burrow. He's got, somebody who I think maybe the jury is still out as far as a play caller in Zach Taylor, although he's been mega frustrating in certain areas, especially running back target share. But yeah, Jamar Chase is kind of slotting in for most people as the alpha for the Bengals. I'm wondering, do you think, like, with the other guys taking up a bunch of targets, Do you think that maybe like a wide receiver 1 position is in the realm of possibilities? I know you have Ja'Marr Chase ranked as a wide receiver 2, but I'm curious if you think that's in his realm of possibilities, or would he just need too many things to go his way for that to happen?
So let's look at what is actually kind of a nice, almost a snug fit here. You project that Ja'Marr Chase is going to come out and he's going to play some X, he's going to play some Z, depending on how they view T. Higgins. Now let's look at the facts. Last year, AJ Green had 104 targets and was in many ways, guys, if not in totality, was in many ways the worst wide receiver in fantasy football.
Yeah. Efficiency wise.
Yeah. So let's look at this. AJ Green with 104 targets, he caught 47 passes, okay? 523 yards. He averaged 7.0 fantasy points per game in PPR. To find the next receiver who averaged that low a number, you have to go down to Anthony Miller, who everybody knows is a superstar.
Fired. Same age, I think those two are the same age.
Yeah, and Chicago's trying to trade him. He had 76 targets and averaged 6.9 fantasy points per game. After you get to Anthony Miller, you're all the way down to Chris Conley, who had 6.5 fantasy points per game on 63 targets. That is a miserable season that AJ Green had. By comparison, Devontae Parker, 103 targets, right below AJ Green, 11.9 fantasy points per game. Go up a couple of spots. AJ Brown had 106 targets, 17.3 fantasy points per game. Now, I'm not going to say Ja'Marr Chase is going to come out here and he's going to go like AJ Brown and finish as a top 6 fantasy receiver on 104 targets. But it's within the realm of possibility that this guy sees over 100 targets and doubles up the production of AJ Green.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's just got that super versatile skill set that he can do anything for this team. And I think that's why they took him with what I think was maybe a bit of a luxury pick, because Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins are a dynamite pairing. But obviously the Joe Brady and Joe Burrow connection, chilling with the Joes, Ja'Marr Chase was obviously sent to the Bengals. I'm curious, Joe, like everybody's saying that T. Higgins is the one who's mega hurt by this, but with that versatility, like I know you have them ranked close, but how do you think Ja'Marr Chase affects Tyler Boyd in his heavily targeted role of the past?
Well, sorry guys, a little bug in my throat. You know, I don't know how much Boyd is really all that effective because they still don't really have a great tight end. They're going to play 11 personnel as their base. Like, I think the thing that hurts Boyd and especially Higgins is the fact that Chase is going to be more efficient on the perimeter than AJ Green was. And, you know, there's going to be more production to go around there. But I still think Tyler Boyd, they could have signed prime Randy Moss, and I think Tyler Boyd's role was still going to be Tyler Boyd's role. Like, he's going to be the slot guy. Exactly. So, you know, I just think that's Tyler Boyd, I think I really didn't change my ranking with him at all. He was one of my most drafted players last year, and I'd be happy to have him fall in my lap in the 6th and 7th round again, quite frankly.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you've got, just for some context for the listeners there, you've got Chase at 24, Boyd at 28, and Higgins at 32, which I was happy to see that you didn't drop T. Higgins that much, because I do think there is room for these guys to produce at right around the levels that you have ranked, with a little bit of upside on that potentially with some spiked weeks, because this team's going to pass a lot with Joe Burrow in there. He was throwing the ball, I think, over 40 times a game, whereas without him, they only threw it about 27 times a game in Cincinnati. So I think at full health, this offense is going to be like an over 600 pass attempt team. And I think these guys can all eat to an extent, as like really good trio of wide receivers. I think they probably rival the Cowboys as far as best trios in the league. It's a
really good group. And they're going to be fun. I know that. Like, this is going to be a fun football team. It's just a matter of, did they make the prudent pick? And to get into some NFL talk, I don't think Miami expected them to make the splashy pick, because I don't think no matter what Dolphin fans tell you, I don't think the Dolphins traded up to number 6 with the intention of drafting Jalen.
No, they were not ready for that whatsoever. But it's the Waddle pick is an interesting one for me. I still don't know what to do with him, but
nor do I.
Maybe that's a conversation for another date. The last wide receivers I want to talk about here are the Rams group. really, really interesting group that Ty and I have both expressed various levels of love for in the past. I am a full-blown Cooper Kupp truther.
We're always taking heat for our Rams wide
We are, yeah. Everybody just dogs us for liking Cooper Kupp. And
people
it's like,
hate wide receiver twos.
Yeah, jerks. But I was looking at the rankings there, Joe, and you've got Bob Woods at wide receiver 14 and Cooper Kupp at wide receiver 19 there. So Ty, you said it there, wide receiver twos. I'm curious, Joe, with Matt Stafford coming in, do you think the offense shifts quite a bit to fit his skill set? It seems like bringing in a quarterback like that, you're not just going to really want to dink and dunk. But I'm curious to see what you think they're going to do out in LA with Sean McVay.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a more explosive offense, but like when it comes to Robert Woods in particular, he is going to be one of my most drafted players. And here are his numbers the last 3 seasons: wide receiver 13 in 2020, wide receiver 14 in 2019, wide receiver 11 in 2018. Okay. His current ADP in best ball 10 since the start of May is wide receiver 17. So not a huge discount, but there's a discount nonetheless. However, look at the consistency of his performance with the Rams offense going in the crapper the last couple of years. In McVay's first season in Los Angeles, they were 6th with 5.8 yards per play. In 2018, they were second, 6.4. They were 13th in 2019. And then for the first time in McVay's tenure with the Rams, they were 18th in 2020 in yards per play. Obviously, that coincides with McVay's complete lack of faith in Jared Goff. That faith was declining. Meanwhile, Robert Woods is just cruising along. He's putting up these numbers where he's managed to play through a declining offense, and for the first time in the McVay era, a subpar offense, and he's still putting up high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1 numbers. I know people hate Matthew Stafford. Streak. Right, yeah. Like, I know people hate Matthew Stafford. Try to tell me that offense is going to be worse with him. Please try to tell me that. I know, exactly. It's not going to be worse. So I'm drafting these receivers, and I'm drafting them aggressively.
All right, so with that kind of baked in, thinking that it's going to be a little bit more explosiveness, what about like the deep downfield work? Do you think Robert Woods might be the beneficiary of that? Or do you think he's just going to maintain that efficiency with after the catch? Like, who is taking the downfield targets here? Can't be Tutu Atwell. Cannot be Tutu Atwell.
No, I'm a noted Deshaun Jackson lover for best ball.
Me too, dude. I love it. I'm an Eagles fan, Joe. Just for context.
Well, I mean, just what a disaster.
Yeah.
Oh God! But no, that's what they want Deshaun Jackson to do. But no, Woods can do a little bit of that stuff.
I think so too.
Yeah, and I think Higbee can do a little bit of that stuff too. It's just, but I think they want I think Atwell, not. I don't think you draft a guy in the second round to be insurance for Deshaun Jackson, but I think that's kind of what he is.
If not just another guy who can fit perfectly in that pre-snap motion scheme. Like maybe he hurts Robert Woods in the sense where Robert Woods isn't going to get that rushing touchdown we've become accustomed to. But yeah, I think Robert Woods is the clear benefactor in LA, if for no other reason than, like, I don't think this offense is going to change too dramatically, but I do think they're going to add that vertical element that's been totally absent, especially off play action, which could be really dangerous in Sean McVay's system. So I'm really excited. And even if Deshaun Jackson plugs in my lineup 3 out of the first 5 weeks, which he will before he gets hurt, we've paid off that 19th round best ball.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, he's free. He's free right now. So yeah, that's the thing with Deshaun Jackson. That's what they want to do. But like, there's another feather in Robert Woods' cap, though. All right, well, Matthew Stafford, he's coming here to bomb the ball down the field. Well, their deep threats are who? Deshaun Jackson, who's played like 3 games in the last 15 years, or Tutu Atwell, who weighs the same as my newborn nephew. So, I mean, like, you have, and the doctor's a little concerned about his weight, by the way, my newborn nephew. So, you have a little bit of a concern there with, I just think it's just going to be a more efficient offense.
Yeah. Ty had a really good tweet actually yesterday, I think, regarding Tutu Atwell, that you can't even create a player in Madden that weighs as little as he does. You just can't go that low. So
yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, yeah, just like everybody is going to get a little uptick. I even think, and not to suffer from trutherism too hard here, guys, I think Cooper Kupp can almost do like a little bit of that like tight end stuff out of the slot where he might be able to, if schemed up properly, do some stuff in the seam, just with his after the catch ability. But maybe I'm, getting a little bit too ahead of myself on the Cooper love, but I think he can do a little bit of that as well, especially if he's got the quarterback who can deliver that to him, which he does now, right? So I love it.
I think he does. And I'm really excited. I know people are a little bummed that Bears-Rams game is the first Sunday night football. And I think people are going to be upset if Andy Dalton's the starter for the Bears. A totally different story if it's Fields. But I'm personally excited to see what that offense looks like, Matthew Stafford in that Rams offense. I really am. I think sometimes we get a little bit too crazy anointing McVay this boy genius. But if he hasn't had the quarterback he's wanted, I am excited to see what happened. This is the guy they wanted. They traded 2 first-round picks for this guy.
Oh, yeah.
Like people come out, they're yelling at me on Twitter. They're like, "Oh, bro, they didn't trade 2 first-round picks for Stafford. They traded them to get rid of Goff." And then I look at it and I say, like, look at what the Eagles got for Carson Wentz, who's coming off an awful season.
Exactly.
They got a first-round pick for him. So, like, they traded 2 first-round picks to get Matthew Stafford. Make no mistake about it. Maybe they threw in the 3rd for them to take Goff, but they gave up 2 first-round picks to get Matthew Stafford. Make no mistake about that.
Yeah, 100%. He's just gonna take it to the next level there. I love that. All righty, fellas. So, I think we're at the hour mark. I think that that's the pretty good epi we've put in here. Joe, I want to say thank you for joining us tonight. It has been a pleasure. Would love to have you back on the airwaves sometime soon. Ty and I have been talking about doing some live best balls on the True North airwaves, and you are, watching you go through a best ball draft is actually fantastic content to listen to. You, like I said, like your energy, the content that you spit out is just top notch. Actually, I was in the Kings Classic draft last year, Joe. That Bob Lung puts on, and I was.
Bob does a great job. Love Bob.
Oh, dude,
great guy.
That was so much fun. It was my first year in. It was an honor to be in that draft. My first year doing an auction draft as well. And it was super cool to hear you narrating a draft that I was a part of, dude. So we would love to have you on for one of those at some point and go through some of these picks.
I hope I could see you guys in person this year. Depends on Sirius XM's plans, which I never know until the last minute. So I have to, it's just the way things go in radio, but I'd love to be there in person. I don't know if you guys have ever been to the Hall of Fame.
No, I have not.
It's awesome. No, are you guys both in Vancouver?
We're both in Victoria, just across the pond on Vancouver Island, but we live in Victoria.
Okay, all right. Well, that's an area of the country I've never been to. I've never even been to that area of our country. So I'd love to come out and visit you guys. But if you guys get a chance to come to Canton for the Kings Classic, the Pro Football Hall of Fame is something you should experience. It is really cool.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. So like I said, it was a pleasure to have you on. If anyone wants to check out Joe at FG_Dolan, but if you haven't checked out Joe already, then get out from under that rock that you're living under, because you're missing out like no other. Ty, you got any parting shots for the people, my man?
No, just make sure you are following. Make sure Joe Dolan is on your list. Make sure you are subscribed to fantasypoints.com so you can get the rankings, and make sure you're subscribed to the Fantasy Feast. Still somehow that show is fucking underrated. It is mind blowing. Make sure you are subscribed to all the ways that you can connect with Joe, because you won't regret it. It'll make you a better fantasy player. And guys, just thanks so much for coming on.
Guys, I wish I could give you more time tonight. Let me make it up to you at some other point later this summer. I'm excited. I feel like I could go for longer tonight. So just thank you so much for being accommodating, and I can't wait to be back on.
Always love it, man. Thank you. Yeah. So we'll see everybody next week. Thanks for tuning in. Until then, peace.